21 years ago, I was walking down the street in Brighton with my friend Charlie, and we were going back to his flat. And as we turned into his road, everybody had put their bin bags out, and the bin truck was coming down the road, and we were walking up towards it. And as we got close to the garbage truck, Charlie suddenly said to me, "Ooh, what's that?" And I looked down, and in this pile of bin bags, there was a cardboard box full of old notebooks. And they were going to go into the bin truck, so we picked them up, and we scampered back to his place. And we had found a collection of journals that were written by a man called John Richard Percival, known as Dick Percival. And this is the first one, and this is from 1925. And it's in perfect condition. And this is the last one, which is from 1976, when Dick was living with his second wife, Sheila, in Hove, and was just recovering from a surgery for lung cancer. And in between those, there are 13 notebooks in total that cover the 50 years between 1925 and 1975-76. So, in 1925, Dick Percival is a very, very privileged young man. This was his father, Sir Major General Edward Maxwell Percival, and this was his mother, Nora, and this is Dick, and this is his sister, Diana. And they lived in Farnham, and Dick was at Charterhouse School, and he had very, very, very big ideas about what he was going to do with his life. He writes in one diary entry, he wonders whether he will be a great actor, or a great artist, or if he should be a great author, or if he should be Prime Minister. He decides he'll be Prime Minister and a great author at the same time. He leaves Charterhouse, age 16, and he goes to Berlin in 1926. So the height of the Weimar Republic, he's 16 years old. He's led a very protected life, and he's completely shocked at all that is going on in Berlin. He falls in with some slightly older young men who take him to gay bars and transgender bars, and he's very shocked by what he finds. He's a bit of a prude, but he's also a great romantic. He believes that romance will save everyone. And he falls wildly in love with a woman called Frida, who is Russian. She's in Berlin with her mother. They've escaped the Bolsheviks and lost everything. He falls wildly in love with her. She's older than he is and not at all interested in him. Until she meets his parents, and then she becomes much more interested in him, as does her mother. And they decide that they are going to marry. Dick is 17 at this point. Frida's probably 25, 26. Dick is convinced Frida is the only one who can save him. She is the only one who will ever understand him, and the only one who can unleash his genius as an author, which is what he's decided to be. But their relationship, he returns to England, he tells his family he's going to marry Frida. They say, absolutely not. You are not going to marry Frida. He says he is, he's determined. They say they'll cut him off from all the family money if he does. But he goes off and he gets a job in business, determined to make enough money to marry Frida. Their relationship fizzles out over time, it has to be said, but not before she insists that he writes about their engagement, makes an announcement in a leading London newspaper, which he does reluctantly and terrified that his family will find out. But he puts the advert in the Daily Herald, which is a communist newspaper at the time, in the full knowledge his family are never going to read it. And just to be safe, he puts it in German as well. Soon after that, the relationship fizzles out, and Dick Percival manages to get a job at Colour magazine, the most fascinating magazine in the world. which closed in around about December 1934, so it probably wasn't that fascinating, but it was an arts magazine. He had a job in there. He was sort of helping out. He was sort of the intern. Sometimes he'd be paid, and sometimes he wouldn't, and he'd never know which one it would be. However, one day, he walks into Colour magazine, and there is a woman there who he describes as the most beautiful woman in the world. He describes her as this adorable young thing, and he falls hopelessly in love with her. Her name is Serena, and she's German, so he speaks fluent German, having studied in Berlin. And he's absolutely obsessed with her. She was very beautiful. This is a painting of Serena, done by an artist called Walter Hippel. He starts to take her for lunch and dinner, and begins to find out more about her. Firstly, she's married, but this doesn't put him off. Secondly, she has a son, and he imagines a little golden-haired boy running around after this perfect young mother. And then after a while, he finds out she's got 3 sons, and the eldest one is just a couple of years younger than he is. It turns out that Serena is 23 years older than him and in her 40s, but this still doesn't put him off. He is wildly in love with her. They continue to date. She gets a divorce. He's thrilled. She marries someone else. It doesn't put him off. He continues to pursue her. He gets a new job at the European Herald, which is printed in 5 languages, 6 languages, including Esperanto. Very hopeful. He continues his relationship with Serena. He then gets a job in Singapore with the Singapore Free Press, and when he leaves, they do a little cartoon for him with the European Herald's cartoonist. A little cartoon there to say goodbye. He goes off. He's writing in his diary on the boat to Singapore. He's very nervous. He stops off in Berlin on the way to see Serena. It all goes marvellously, and her husband seems quite accepting. As he's writing in this diary, he gets to the end of the notebook while he's halfway through a story about someone on the ship. And at the end of the notebook, he writes, "To be continued in next volume." But that volume is missing from the collection. I don't have it, because when he picks up again, it is 1937, and he's on a round-the-world trip with Serena, who is married in Singapore. And I don't know what happened. Something happened. He writes about it frequently in later diaries, but never actually says what's happened. But he talks about the fateful events of Singapore that forever changed his relationship with Serena and meant that he no longer trusted her or trusted that she loved him. So I don't know what happened, but he ends up married. And he stops writing about Serena, pretty much. He's written about her obsessively up to that point, but he stops, only mentioning that the marriage is volcanic and that she is often very cruel and that he realises he's made a big mistake. He comes back to the UK in 1938 with his new German wife. I don't know when he tells his family, but they are horrified and they cut him off entirely from the finances. They sort of stay in touch, but they are very, very unhappy about him marrying Serena. It's 1938, it's the run-up to World War II. She's German, she's got 3 adult German sons who are now his stepsons, who are ready to fight for Hitler, and quite keen, apparently, to fight for Hitler. She leaves and goes to Switzerland to be in a neutral country. He is unemployed, he doesn't know what to do. His family tell him he should volunteer to fight. He is the least likely person in the world to send to a war. His idea of a lovely evening is to go around the park in Farnham and kiss the roses to show how beautiful they are. Anyway, he does. He volunteers, which is an extraordinary act of bravery, really. He volunteers to join the gunners. He does his training. He absolutely hates it, hates every second of it. And he's very shocked to find that he's working with people who he's never had any dealings with before, largely working class people. He's probably never had a conversation with a working class person. And he's very shocked by how rough they are and how much swearing there is. How he has to eat out of a tin plate, and he's going to have to eat out of a tin plate for as long as the war goes on. It's all horrifying. But slowly, as he begins to work with these men, he realises that they're starting to call him pal, and chum, and mate, and brother. And no one's ever called him anything like that before. And he has a real turnaround. He becomes a much nicer man, however, still hating every moment of being in the army, when mysteriously one day he gets asked to an interview in London. He has no idea what the interview is for. He shows up, it's very mysterious. He has a long chat with Wing Commander W, and he's sent away again. A bit later, a few months, I think, later, he's called back for another interview, and it's clearly a job, and they say that they'll get him out of the army, so he's hugely excited. They tell him at that second interview that he's pretty much got the job, and they'll let him know in 10 days' time. He waits for 6 weeks, and hears nothing, and he's heartbroken. But then, sure enough, one day, he's called up and told that he's to report immediately to Bletchley Park, where he works in Hut 3 on the team that was working on the Enigma code. Probably sort of in admin rather than doing any code cracking. He was probably there as a translator. It's extraordinary that he was at Bletchley, such a secret place, the most secret place in Britain, when he had a German wife and 3 German stepsons. So it's a wee bit of a mystery. Serena writes, there she is, she's in Switzerland, that's a photograph that she sent him. She's spending money like there's no tomorrow, and all her letters that she writes to him ask him for more money. These letters have recently surfaced with an organisation in America who have just scanned them for me and sent them to me. So if there's anybody who's willing to translate a lot of German letters, do let me know. So yes, where are we? There we go. Serena. The war ends. He gets a job in Hamburg. He's reunited with Serena. The marriage is horrible. It's going terribly badly. He eventually comes back to this country and he gets a job with the BBC monitoring service. And the job of the BBC monitoring service, which still exists today, back then it was to listen to broadcasts from all over the world, write reports about what was being said and send it to government. And it still happens today. Used to be paid for by the government, but now we pay for it through the licence fee. And it's people watching YouTube videos of whoever might be a threat to us. This is his staff file, which, when I got in touch with the BBC monitoring service to see if they had any information about him, they said it's very unlikely, but we'll have a look. We only keep 3% of the staff files from that kind of job from that time, and his was one of them, which was really fabulous. And there is his staff photograph. Serena dies in his arms in 1960 of a heart attack. The marriage lasted. It was awful. He regrets never having had children. And she dies, and almost in the moment that she dies, he gets back this romantic idea of her. And he's devastated that she's died. a year later, he starts writing in the diary again, and he is remarried. And he's married this lady, Sheila. She's lovely, Sheila. She made him very, very happy. And it was a happy end to the story. And I've been tracing Dick Percival's lives. I've had these diaries for 21 years. All sorts of different bits of information are starting to come to me. Just a few weeks ago, I met a friend of Dick Percival's, a woman who's now in her 80s. And Dick Percival was in love with her mother in 1934. Spent 2 weeks with her, never got over it, was convinced that he should have married this woman, Gina. And was disappointed when he met Gina again in the 1970s, when Gina was in her 80s, to find out how much she'd changed. But Dick, these are his love letters, which her daughter, Patsy, who knew Dick very well, passed on to me. Very briefly, I'm a filmmaker, and I'm adapting these journals into a web series that will be released on the 1st of January of next year. It will continue through to the 31st of December. And if you sign up, you will receive short films based on journal entries that were written on the day that they are delivered to you. Have I got time for the trailer, Tim?
Go on.
Have I got sound? Have I got sound?
Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully we've got sound.
Yeah,
Yes, we've got sound. Here we go.
yeah.
August the 4th, 1972. 3 Rochester Gardens, Hove. I have kept journals for so many years now that it has become a habit, almost an instinct. I suppose I do it for the same reason that an artist paints a self-portrait, or even an entire series of self-portraits throughout his life. I often feel that each time I make a new entry in my diary, it is like an artist adding a new stroke with the brush to his self-portrait. But why does he want to do it? What is the impulse behind it? It cannot be that he wants to look at or live with a lot of likenesses of himself. I hardly ever turn back to my earlier journals once they are completed. The most I ever do is to dip back into the pages of the current journal before writing a new entry. When I do that, I find that it gives me something. That what I have written seems to have a certain value, at any rate for me. These journals are a record, a recreation of one person's life. Alas, only a very ordinary person's life, as I am forced to recognize, and contrary to all my earlier beliefs and expectations. As such, it seems to have a certain value and to be worth continuing. Or is it just a form of mania? One silly person talking to himself all through his life? I don't think so. Perhaps it is more an instinct to preserve life by recording it, and to prevent the past, the whole of one's past life, from becoming absolutely nothing. What I write is always the truth, but seldom the whole truth. There have been things in my life that I could never have brought myself to record, for shame. The truth is that the only subject I am able to write about is myself. The ancient Greek philosophers said, "Know thyself." Perhaps they would have been wiser to have said, "Forget thyself."